a little bit of an overview about what we're all doing here today. So this is our first ever Burlington Code Academy, or BCA, Talks Tech event. So this is going to be the first video in our series, and I'm the community coordinator here, and I'm here with Maddie Gale.
Hello, I'm Maddie. I'm the marketing coordinator at BCA.
Yeah, and so a little background on BCA. We're a remote software development and UX design boot camp. And the reason that we are doing a webinar series, it might seem a little odd, but it's because we've noticed, in the tech industry that we think that there's a need to sort of amplify the voices and get more notice on the people that make up the tech industry outside of maybe our predictable standards that we all sort of will imagine. So I'm super excited to have our guests here today. So we have Anderson, Megan, and McKenzie here, all our esteemed members of the game industry. And so to get started, I'm gonna have each of them share their background and let us know a little bit about themselves. So if whoever wants to start, maybe Andy can take it away, and then McKenzie and Megan, if that works.
Yeah, sure. I just graduated from Champlain College in May, and I'm currently a software engineer at Sabre Astronautics, which is a space ops defense kind of company. So we use a game engine to make cool visualizations for space defense. Yeah, so I did game design and data science, but I'm in engineering right now.
Cool. I am a 2019 Champlain graduate from the game design major. I was actually hired right out of my senior show. I got my job offer on the day of the graduation. And I went to work for Gameloft for a year. And I am currently transitioning my work permit over from Gameloft to Ludia, where I'm going to be a narrative designer there on one of their upcoming story-based games.
And I'm Megan McAvoy. I'm the creative director at Red Magpie, which is right in Burlington. It's a nonprofit game studio. And I have a bachelor's of science in game art and animation, also from Champlain College, for class of 2018, I believe. My favorite game is Abzu. That's what I got.
Cool. Awesome. So I'm curious if we could hear about your introduction into the world of gaming. I know a lot of people have that introduction at a young age, but I'm curious if we could kind of go in the same order, starting with Anderson, about your first introduction to gaming and who introduced you to gaming.
Yeah, my dad introduced me to this more older game called Heroes of Might and Magic. So if anyone knows that, props. But that was on the old Macintosh kind of thing when I was pretty young. And so I played games with my dad for a good period of time. And then late middle school to high school, really got into Minecraft like most people my age. And unknowingly, I started learning game design by creating servers and that kind of thing for other players. So that's kind of how I got into it.
So my story with games is always kind of a bit of a odd one. I never really considered myself a gamer until I think someone else referred to me as one. And then I was like, I guess. My introduction to games, I couldn't even tell you the first game I played because I never really thought about oh, I'm playing this game for me. It was always I'm playing this game with my brother. So a little background, my brother, Ryan, my best friend growing up, he is developmentally delayed and in a wheelchair. So games were really like a way for us to come together and be siblings, like from a very young age. Whether it was we would go to like an arcade and we would just play all the games and just hang out. It was just a great way for me to bond with him, despite our differences. And it was also a way for Ryan to kind of come into his own and be like a typical kid. So I remember we had like the GameCube and the Wii and all that. And I couldn't tell you when I started. I could only tell you that I never stopped.
Yeah, I'm similar. I don't think I ever really identified as #gamer until right before college, until I'd already like applied to be a game developer in school. But I played this game, and to this day I called it like the girl game because I have no idea what it was called. And it was on this floppy disk, and it was like a girl with purple hair and like stone castles fighting goop monsters. That's what I remember about it. If anybody knows the title, please tell me. I was very young. I was like on a old Windows computer, and I think that was the first game that I was very, very invested in.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. So I'm curious, kind of adding on to that, how did mentorship influence your gaming career, from whether that started earlier than college or in college, or started, once you entered the workforce? I'm curious about the mentor-mentee relationship within the gaming industry.
Yeah, I think I got most of my mentorship at Champlain College. Um, I've always been kind of like push the boundaries of whatever I'm doing, so try new things. And I think the first class that I took that I learned a lot about that was with a Professor Ferguson at Champlain College. And one of our projects, we had to kind of like take a social impact and like develop a game around that. And so I took a very abstract idea, and it was not highly approved at first, and then over iterations people liked it, and it kind of succeeded in the end. So learning to take things and make them for the better and iterate and make them for the better audience that you're looking for is I thought that was really important. That was probably one of the bigger lessons I took away. So
Yeah, so there was a ton of, professors at Champlain who really helped push me to where I am now. Like there were certainly times at Champlain where I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't know if I'm going to be a game designer. And it was just going to professors and having them, steer me in the right direction. Like, okay, so you're not into systems design. Have you thought about narrative design? And I'm like, that's a thing. And it is. Now I'm working on a dating sim. So yes. In terms of in the industry, my last mentor at Gameloft actually helped me get my upcoming job at Ludia, which was fantastic. It was a nice thing because she was a senior narrative designer. She was a woman in the industry, and just being able to like meet with her every other week, we would sit down and I would just be like, I'm having this issue. What do I do? And she always had my back. And going into the industry in a position where I was like, oh, I don't know what to do really. I'm a little cautious here. Having somebody else like have my back and like tell me I wasn't crazy if I'm like, this is something that I'm struggling with. It's just so nice. Even if it's just that, even if it's just someone being like, you're sane, you're good. That's like so important in this industry, especially.
Yeah, I'll echo that again. I've had like a lot of mentors from college era, but the people who like have pushed me the hardest have actually been like my friends, and also like at the time other students. Like I have this really like vivid memory right now of like Ryan Huggins, who now owns Weathered Sweater in Burlington. It's a game studio. They're awesome. They're releasing a game called Skater Gator, I think. I'm just going to shamelessly plug them. And Ryan, I think I met him like my freshman year, and he pushed me really hard in a way that teachers didn't. And I really appreciate that specific friendship. Obviously, I've had more, but that's like the one I'm remembering right now. So I feel like I owe a lot to other people in that term, in terms of like game development, learning. Like, I feel like you have to learn with others because there's so many like unspoken standards and like unspoken rules, but then also spoken, but you need to like look up the right word to find the YouTube tutorial or the weird thread online. So it's really, really helpful to have that community of mentors in your life as a game developer.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Those were all great. Thank you. And then my next question is, something that Maddie and I talk about a lot as being women in this industry is the fact of like, what is this typical image that we have as a gamer? Is there one? Is it correct? Are we wrong? And I'm curious how you all feel you identify or differ sort of from this image.
So I took a bit to think about this question. So there's like a typical gamer, like if you actually look at people and kind of like generalize them, and there's kind of like the stereotypical gamer, which I think are two different things. Which, there's a stereotypical gamer which never comes out of like their cave or their room, just plays games all day. But it turns out most gamers aren't actually like that. I'd say, everyone really plays games. There's mobile games, there's console games and PC games, and there's such a wide diversity. There's no real like typical gamer, but if we're going by any kind of stereotype, I'd say myself, I'm fairly extroverted, and I enjoy public speaking, which is typically something that gamers don't like doing, I guess. But yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
This one, I don't know. This question stopped me when I was thinking about it. Like you always, like Andy said, like you always have that stereotype of a gamer, and I don't think I've actually met anyone like that. But then again, maybe they're stuck in their cave, so I wouldn't know. I normally don't think of myself as a gamer. Like I don't really tend to go around and be like, yeah, I'm a gamer, despite the fact that I don't know, I play a lot of games. I enjoy playing games. I'm bad at them. Maybe that's it. Maybe you have to be good at games to be a gamer. I think the biggest, I don't know, problem with the whole gamer stereotype is that some people identify themselves as gamers and almost think it's an exclusive club where, I don't know, you wouldn't do that if you're like, I'm trying to think of anything else. Like if I was like, I'm a soccer player. Oh, cool. No one's gonna gatekeep that. No one's gonna be like, okay, well, how many times have you kicked the ball in the last month? Like, it's one of those things. Like I play games, therefore I'm a gamer. It's the noun to describe what you're doing. I think that we need to make it less of like this exclusive club and more of just a way to describe people with a common interest. So that, I don't know, one day I'll be like, yes, I'm a gamer because I play games.
I think to answer like what the typical gamer is, I think we're also seeing a newer stereotype emerge, which is like a young, skinny, usually light-skinned tomboy tech girl with an alternative hair color in like kids movies. I've seen at least 6 of them. Usually the hair color is like purple. I don't know. Am I wrong? So I think I visually kind of close to this stereotype, but I'm not really straight. I'm non-binary. I've got physical and mental health disabilities, and I'm not actually a technical wizard. I'm quite bad at programming. I'm trying. I've been trying for 6 years. Still trying. Uh, but I think, yeah, like that other stereotype of, I don't know, like the Cheeto dust on the controller, uh, poor hygiene, behaving inappropriately towards women type stereotype. I think both of these images that are like talked about are a problem because they both gatekeep just by existing as images, as typical like stereotypes. And I think they're both pretty outdated and extremely whitewashed. And I think that's a giant problem for obvious reasons. All the reasons that whitewashing are bad.
Yeah, I think that that is a very accurate observation. I'm curious to know, like, we talk about this gatekeeping and these barriers. What barriers do you think exist for those underrepresented groups within the industry, and like, where are they? Where does that gate lie?
So I guess I'll go on this again. So I think are you asking for the games industry or games like gamers?
I think both. I think a little bit of both. I mean, I think that a lot of people get their start in the game industry by being a gamer. So,
Okay. Well, I'll answer to the games industry. I think that, I mean, if we're gonna say whitewash is probably a good term for it. Usually when I think of games industry, at least 10 years ago, more so, it's just like a whole bunch of old white guys making games. But I think that people are starting to realize that more than just the white guy in the basement stereotype are the audience of games. And there's been a lot more initiative and movements to kind of expand and try to hire more people and diversify a company. I think part of the problem also came from like I really don't know how long ago and how much it's continued, but I know it still exists. But even in primary education, like telling women that they should avoid like STEM as a topic, that kind of thing, definitely contributes because that just, I think you're saying gatekeeping might be the term for uh, kind of funneling in more old white guys into the game industry. So, yeah.
Yeah, on that note, I feel like the gates for gamers and the game industry are honestly very different. In terms of gamers, it really depends on the person. From what I find, if somebody doesn't want you to be in their exclusive group and they don't think that you're good enough to be a gamer, they're gonna find any way to put that gate there. Like, oh, if you don't know this game, you're not a real gamer. You've never played Final Fantasy, not a gamer. Or oh, you really like the Elder Scrolls. Can you name every single NPC in the game? And it's one of those things. I'm like, maybe somebody can do that. Maybe somebody can't do that. But I'm not going to know every single detail that they want, that they're pulling out. Like, okay, sure, this isn't a trivia game. It's not trivia night at the pub. I can be a gamer without knowing 20,000 facts about your favorite game. In terms of the game industry, it's a bit more difficult. I find that it's a lot about experience, which is kind of like Anderson said, it's a lot of old white guys in the industry. they are the experienced ones. So keeping you out by being, oh, I'm sorry, you're just too junior for your opinion to matter, or something along those lines. It tends to lie right there. That's the gate. It's, oh, we don't want any like little girls coming into the industry. They don't know anything. Look, how can we have women in the industry? They're not as good as Mark over here who has 25 years experience. And I'm like, yeah, I'm 24. Mark's been working since I was born. I'm sorry. But it's a lot of people who are who's been in the industry, in this fandom, a games fandom, for a very long time. And now we're seeing these great progressive changes. We're having more women, we're having more people of color come in. And I think some people are a little, not quite scared, but very resistant to change. And that is kind of sparking a lot of gatekeeping within the industry. But on the other hand, you also find people who are incredibly willing, and it's wonderful to see those people step up and, mentor the newcomers and be like, yeah, we're going to bring you in. We're going to help you out. You're going to go far in this industry. I think that's pretty much what you need more of in the industry to like combat gatekeeping.
My answer is kind of long and pretty sad. Because I made a list, kind of. So the things I've noticed are all of the isms, so like racism, sexism, ableism, and ageism, etc. The fact that there are these stereotypical portrayals of typical gamers. I think like McKenzie, your story of you saying like, I'm not a gamer, and like not identifying as a gamer until somebody else told you, that really resonates with something that we see at Red Magpie a lot, where we do like community workshops, and we'll ask, or we'll like approach a young preteen or teen woman and ask if she wants to join our educational Rad Jams game dev program, right? And she usually shyly shakes her head and is like, you should ask my brother, like, or my friend Sean, I don't know. Like, like there's this very real problem where you don't see yourself represented, so you don't identify. Once you get into the industry, unequal pay is a really big barrier, or this perception that game developers make a lot of money. A lot of us don't. Like, I know, McKenzie, your face is so funny. You're like, yeah, we don't. And then building off of that, next list item is like frequent layoffs. The fact that there's very little settling into one place because of these frequent layoffs. So you might move to San Francisco for a job and then be laid off 6 months later, or the project ends. It's not always like layoffs, like the project timelines, the ways that things line up. I digress. So you move to San Francisco, you got to move back and turn around to move to Boston for 3 years, and then your contract is up. So you move to Montreal, and then you move to the UK. I don't know, like you got to be very mobile, and that is a barrier to a lot of people. Another thing is crunch culture in studios. So for people like me with mental health and physical disabilities, crunch culture, which is this push to do a lot of overtime, like an unhealthy amount of overtime in the studio. It is like near impossible for me to do that. And there are many people like me, and doing crunch itself creates health problems that make it harder to do crunch. So that is a big problem, and related to crunch culture is the idea that young people's perceived passion and energy, but lack of financial self-value, I don't know what to call that, are to be exploited for the benefit of the company. And that contributes to rampant ageism. So we've been talking a lot about the older white guys, but maybe they don't even exist at the studio anymore because it's hard to exploit them. I'm sorry, I'm such like a, I'm gonna be a troublemaker with my answers. Let me get translated here. Okay. This is a problem because it is valuable to have an array of ages and levels of experience on your teams. Younger folks could be more with the times when it comes to technology, but there's nothing saying that like somebody hasn't been working hard to stay with the times and are getting forcefully phased out of their position of seniority because they cost too much or are simply old. And oftentimes crunch, as I said, is literally debilitating to the point where as you age, the adverse health effects of crunch and unsustainable work hours start to manifest in a way that might just inconvenience the studio too much. And 7 on my list, I think, I don't know, I haven't really been keeping track. It's on a list in a document. So number 7 is the way that issues of sexual harassment and racism in studios are addressed are generally ineffective and, if not, outright insulting and dehumanizing. Usually HR, if it exists at all, is there to protect the studio. And I have rarely heard stories of those teams effectively addressing issues of sexual harassment and racism within studios. And that is my hard and sad list of the barriers to game development. And I didn't even talk about technical inaccessibility. I'm sorry.
No, that was so awesome. That was so great and well thought out. I really appreciate you putting time into those answers. I kind of along the same lines of what you just touched on, can we talk a little bit about racism in the studio and diversity within the industry? And if it, does it exist? Is there such a thing as like, are diversity in gaming like so separate that it's like unimaginable? Or like, how can we, have we seen like a rise in this recently? I'm just curious if you guys have had any personal experience with that or seen things on the other end and kind of witnessed these moments of lack of diversity or racism.
Should I go first?
Yeah, we can switch it up. That's fine.
I worked at an unnamed place where my Black woman colleague got paid. They gave her an offering, like starting salary, that was, I think, $10,000 less than my salary, which she took because she felt like she had to. And there's absolutely no blaming her for that. So if that's in your brain, take it out. And I met with the leads because she had the same amount of education as me, the same amount of work experience as me, and they offered her such a low salary that she had to apply for like special free health insurance because I wasn't even getting paid what I was worth, and they offered her $10,000 less. And they were like, oh my God, this does look bad, doesn't it? We should solve this very real problem. And then they, the next week or whatever, called her into their office and gave her a $5,000 raise. So they recognized that there was a problem. They said they were going to fix it. They didn't fix it. And then I met with them again, and they were like, basically like, you should be happy that we did anything. And I was basically like, you should be happy that I'm not suing you. And then I got phased out of the company. So yeah, that's like my horror story, I guess. There's definitely others, but that's like, racism is very real here. There's no question. It's real in our society, so it's real in our studios. I wish that studio executives would take this seriously and stop being like, oh, this is a really easy way to make a quick buck, is just like underpay people based off of how they were born. Yeah, I'm gonna end my story there.
Cool. Mine's a quick answer. I was looking back and I'm like, okay, let me think of any time I have witnessed racism in the industry so far. And I couldn't think of an example because I'm pretty sure every single person I worked with was white, which is a big problem in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Megan mostly covered a pretty great story. So I'm in a similar boat as McKenzie, but yeah, I don't really have much more to add than that. Like what's said is like pretty accurate there. So
Yeah. I also am gonna sort of throw a curve ball in here, if everyone's all right with that. I just wanted to touch a little bit more on the crunch culture that Megan really started talking about, and I saw lots of nods, and I also went to Champlain and definitely can recognize, I mean, that is something that was very prevalent on campus and something that, yeah, I mean, it cannot be good for you. And I'm curious as to sort of why you all think that is such an aspect of the industry and why that's something that's promoted, and sort of, is it an intentional thing? Is it just what needs to be done? Like, how do you all feel about that?
Here, I can touch on this. So my own experience, I had done 6 months of crunch. At the end, I was putting in 24 hours extra a week, which is not sustainable. It was incredible. It was horrible. I literally was gonna just cry myself to sleep every day. It was just like one of those things. And it felt like this is the only thing that needs to be done. Looking back, a lot has to do with like the management of a team. If you can organize everything correctly as the producer, the management portion of a team, you can minimize crunch. I think the reason that there is so much crunch in the industry is, first of all, it's a relic of it used to be done. Big companies are doing it. And it's just like, that's the way it is. And I think part of it is that games need to be turned out quickly. And it's now been expected that games are going to be made in a certain time frame. You see all the time, like, people get mad when a company pushes a game back. And you don't want to have that. You want to be like, okay, we promised to deliver at this point, so we're going to deliver at this point. But every single game I think I've ever seen or ever worked on has gotten pushed back. It's going to happen, and I don't know why it's not just going to be set for a later release in general. I'm sure it has a lot to do with with funding and resources and getting the game approved or greenlit. But crunch itself it's debilitating, but oddly enough, it's so ingrained in the industry now that it's expected, and everyone's like, oh yeah, when we're going to go into launch, you're going to be crunching for at least a month, and it's going to be more. If they tell you at least a month, it's going to be more. And it's sad, but like part of it is something that needs to be done, and I don't know, so new in the industry at my level and from my experience, I honestly don't know what to do about that. I don't know what the solution is. I just know that there's reason behind it, and there's not many quick fixes. There's probably no quick fix to it. If you say this project's going to take 2 years, you're not going to get it greenlit. And if you say it's going to take 1 year, you're going to have people crunching for twice the time.
So I have an opposite experience with crunch as most people. I actually got a really bad rep for the amount of crunch that I did, and people got scared that I would make them crunch. I was putting in easy 60, 80 hours a week for like the past 3 years in school. I really liked it because it pushed me to do kind of really cool things. But now I'm in software, right? And it's like 40 hours a week almost to the T. So it's kind of like the opposite situation that a lot of people go into. And I think what I've learned from like the transition and kind of like sitting in now not a crunch culture situation is I think the best way to avoid crunch is to, kind of like keep your team. It does depend a lot on your project manager or kind of like who's running the group there, but like keeping your team to their hours and like really seeing to the team's needs. There's like lots of people just like, especially with work from home, but people will just be able to like step out for an hour, do what they need to do. Like if they need the time, just take a longer lunch. Like sometimes people take like 2 hours for lunch and it'll just be like totally chill. But most people they're able to get their work done because it's more flexible for them. I think I don't know specific studies, but I hear a lot about how like shorter work weeks or like spending less time directly on work actually improves your focus and your ability to get work done. So, kind of finding your rhythm and working your best for a shorter amount of time, I think will end up yielding better results than working your okayest for way longer than you need to each week. Yeah, so I don't know if that answered the question in the chat, but that's my experience with it.
Since I'm creative director, I do help manage timelines at Red Magpie, and we are very crunch averse. So I think the ways that we have managed that, because we make like extremely short like work time, like development cycles for games. Like so far, all of our game development cycles have been under a year. We have like 3 games now. So the ways that I like to think of it is your game development timeline in terms of cycles, and perhaps this is much easier with a year or 3 month long project, because when you have that shorter timeline, you have to be so focused. Like, it's not waterfall, you can stay agile, but you have to know what your goals are and like use your time wisely to meet them. So we have phases where we like clearly define our goals for alpha, clearly define our goals for beta, leave an extra chunk of time for polish, and then an extra, like, smaller chunk of time for bug fixing. And then we take this whole entire timeline, we cut a third of it and add it, copy paste onto the end, so that, you know, like, people are going to get sick. People are going to have lives that they need to attend to. Things come up. Like, you have to be ready. You have to have time that is literally just like question mark, kind of like allotted at the end in your timeline, so that when things get pushed back, you can still meet your goals with your client without having to continue pushing back deliverables. So that, like, intentional time management, like McKenzie, what you're saying about how it feels like bizarre, like a mismanagement of time. I agree. Because, like, I haven't worked at like a AAA studio, so I don't know. But I would assume if your producer is worth their salt, then either that's like a critical, like, job-ending mistake, or that was planned and that was intentional. Those are the only two that I can conceive. But yeah, and Anderson, like you were saying, like, giving people that space for life, for living life. Like, at Rad McAvoy, we also have a shortened work week. I think we work like 30 hours a week. And that is, like, I cannot stress enough as somebody, as I mentioned, with mental and physical disabilities, how that has changed my life for the better, and how that, like, even if you do have to, like, push a little harder for a week, it does not feel the same as really intense, sustained crunch. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, thank you. And then my last sort of very industry specific question that I have, which I think gets talked about a lot, is if you had talked to me a little bit about character portrayal in the industry, and if you think that portrayal of women, gender norms, BIPOC individuals, that whole umbrella, do you think that how those are portrayed in games influence real life tropes and stereotypes?
So, short answer, yes. But I thought about this for a little bit, and I think part of what does enforce those stereotypes or whatever is the context of the game and the kind of like visuals of the game. So I tried to think about this and break it down a little bit. And so some games have more unique aesthetics, like in art and what everything looks like. And sometimes features are exaggerated, and, like, you know, characters can look all different sorts of ways, and it might not actually affect anyone. So I was thinking more fantasy games that are, you know, they're more like cartoony, or they're less realistic and focus more on, like, you know, imagination and creativity and uh, that kind of thing. I think it's more about the context of what characters are doing in the game that has a larger effect on the players and how that influence would be measurable. So you could have, like, overtly sexualized characters in games, but if it's like, I guess Team Fortress might be an example, where it's a very cartoony aesthetic, like the guys look like the Hulk, and the characters are just pretty wild and exaggerated in all forms, but there's really no context to it. So it might have some minor influence, but compared to a game that's more realistic, which I don't actually play many of those games, but a game that's more realistic, focused on more like the art's very like, this is a human being. Those more realistic games, having visuals that look like that, are going to have a bigger impact on players. because there's like this division between like fantasy and reality. And I think just overall between those two games, or those two types of games, the context of what characters are doing will have the largest impact. So if characters in games happen to carry out some of like the stereotypes, or behave in certain ways, that's going to affect characters or players more, especially in games where you get to make those kinds of choices. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
Yeah, so again, the answer is yes. Portrayals in video games or any media will further stereotypes or create stereotypes. And this is where I get to talk about what I do. As a narrative designer, I am pushing to have more narrative design and writing start earlier in the process of developing a game. A lot of times writers come in later and the character's already created. They're just putting the words to the faces. When you have narrative designers early on, you can think about these tropes and maybe subvert them, make more realistic portrayals. I've met a lot of writers and narrative designers in the industry, and every single one of them has been pushing for a more diverse cast of characters in games. When I was writing characters, I got to choose a lot about them. So I'm looking at this incredibly sexualized woman, and the idea is she's a blonde bimbo. So I'm like, well, maybe she has a PhD. Maybe she's a big old lesbian. Like, you can take these characters and subvert them with writing, but it would have been great to have gone in there from the beginning and be like, okay, let's take it down. Let's make this person, not with just a brassiere going to fight a dragon. Like, maybe we can have some more realistic portrayal. Maybe we can have some more people of color in our cast. Why has everyone got to be white right now? Why has everyone got to be straight? It's so much more fun when you can go in, make a unique cast of characters, and people can see, that there are different ways to perceive things. Now, the problem there is that if you don't quite have like the right strengths, you're going to end up making a caricature of a minority, which is something you don't want to do. Which is why I really feel like the portrayals of characters should be thought of beyond this is what they look like, this is what they're going to do. It needs to have a deeper impact, even if it's a cartoonish game. If it's cartoonish, it makes way to make almost like racist stereotypes, where if you can, catch that early on, you can change it. So having narrative design, having character design come in early can oftentimes help create more realistic or, less tropey characters.
The answer that I have is like the art that we make reflects our world and is in turn reflected by our world, which is the most meta answer that I could come up with. So anytime you see a harmful trope in a game, it's probably referenced from real life, but this definition of real life includes other games and popular media, which are also full of tropes, which I think is why you get this like really messed up echo chamber. Especially in like similar genres where one thing was a financial success and then they're like, all right, that one was good, let's never change it. And I don't know, I see some companies where like this, a part of the fan base is quite hostile. I say fan base in conflicted emotion because I don't know why you would be hostile. Where I feel like there's like this weird like lack of spine that lets that like small hostile group really influence the narrative of your game, which is why we need narrative designers like McKenzie to be like, no. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's as far as my brain has gone.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. And I appreciate all of your candidness when sharing these things with us. So we have about 8 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and field some questions from the audience. We already talked a little bit about like a possible solution to crunch, so I'm going to skip over that one. But we have a question about what are the qualities that great leaders in gaming bring to companies/teams, and do you experience a diverse persona of leadership within your experience in the industry and just other experiences you may have witnessed?
So there's a couple different types of leadership that I've experienced. I think the one that's most effective, well, I kind of like combine two, but there's the two that I'm most familiar with is just like the servant leadership, which is a very common term in Scrum methodologies. So servant leadership is kind of like, as a leader, you're leading by just helping other people. So clearing out any issues that your teams might have and basically making their job easier so they can do their work better, which kind of leans into that of what I was talking about earlier with just having like more flexibility in your workspace. I think that servant leadership helps for quite a few people. Part of what I was like known for like crunching and stuff, I call it like the hype squad leadership. This is really something that I think only works in small teams of people that are just like working towards the same goal with the same thought in mind, that you're just super, super excited about this one thing and you just want to achieve that goal. And so working together and like pushing each other up, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say like a soldier mentality sort of thing, but like really like pushing each other and like getting through this together, which might be too much of that leadership exists in the industry, which might lead to crunch. But I think kind of like some crossover between that might be the better type of leadership, where you're actively supporting your developers, but keeping people interested and engaged in what they're doing without pushing them, too far. So that's my take on it.
So I've had several different leaders in the industry. I find that the ones who work best actually, care about the team and the project. One of my leadership tactics when I created my own company, and I was the lead designer on my senior project. And I really wanted to get to know what everybody wanted out of the project. I wanted to be available to talk to people. Pretty much like just be on that level with everyone else and be approachable. I've had a lot of leaders who are not like that. They are like, nope, sorry, don't talk to me. You're gonna have to bring it up to your lead or bring it up to somebody else. I don't care if there's a problem. I don't care what it is. Just don't talk to me. I've had leaders who are very scapegoat-y, where they would be like, this issue is not my fault. It's so-and-so's fault. And they just kept doing that and doing that and doing that until there's literally nobody else to point the finger at. But I think the best way to be a leader in the game industry is being supportive, because it's not an easy industry for anybody, for any member of that team. And just understanding that your teammates are going to be struggling at points, especially if there's going to be you know, periods of crunch or periods of tension if something doesn't go right. You need to be able to talk to people and really like be empathetic towards them. So yeah, a good leader cares.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think something that I have also, like another way I've heard it portrayed is like uh the idea of like aggressive communication, passive communication, and assertive communication. Or passive aggressive, which I'm just not gonna cover right now. We all know what that is. But aggressive is like my needs matter more than yours. Assertive is your needs matter. Sorry, aggressive. Passive, your needs mean more than mine. And assertive is you have needs and I have needs, and they're both important. Let's meet them both. I think good leaders are assertive, not just like on the personal level, but in the way that is like the company has needs and the worker has needs, and we need to be able to meet them both to do a productive thing to make the money to pay us all. And communication is like crucial for that, and valuing your workers is crucial for that. You have to value people to recognize that they have needs. Yeah. And diverse personas of leadership. I've had very diverse representation of leadership in my life, but I'm not fully sure what that part of the question means. Like, yes, I have experienced diverse personas of leadership. I've seen many different people approach leadership many different ways, and I don't think there's just one way to do it right. I think it does depend on who you are, but I will say I think the aggressive way is wrong, and the passive way gets nothing done.
Awesome. That was awesome. So just a last question, a pretty topical one. How do you think, and the question was, how do you think the pandemic has affected you specifically, but I'm going to make it a little broader. How do you think the pandemic has affected the industry, for the better, for worse, for, you know, whatever? I'm curious to see, because this is already a very online industry. Where do you see the industry growing or losing in the coming years?
So my work is underneath an organization, and the organization itself has gone completely work from home at this point. Like, they're not going to revert back to office work, which I think actually quite a few companies might be doing, from what I've heard. I know maybe Proletariat is a company on the East Coast that recently released Bellbreak. I think they made that decision as well to go completely work from home. I think people are starting to recognize there's really two sides to this coin, but there's a lot of like flexibility in work from home. Like, you don't have to show up at an office from 9 to 5 or whatever office hours are. And it's more of, you can get your work done at the day. Maybe there's like a meeting or two you have to attend. But for the most part, you can be fairly flexible. Although I think there's mental health issues with work from home, where I notice a lot of people have been mentioning it's really hard to separate myself from work because it's at home. I think those are the two big things that came out of it. I personally like being in office just because I like seeing people, but you know, it does come with quite a few benefits, being able to do work at home and wherever.
Yeah, I'm with Anderson on this one. I really prefer to be in an office. I like seeing people. I like going up to people and talking to them face to face. I like being able to get up from my desk and see other people. But I do think that there are some like benefits to the whole work from home lifestyle, especially when it comes to contract work. I think that this is going to hopefully show a lot of companies that you don't need to have a 6-month contract person go from Boston to San Francisco for those 6 months and then expect them to pack up and go back. I think that very well might be helpful. I'm going to be working for a company that will be work from home for the rest of the year. And I'm hoping I'll stay with it long enough to get into the office. But I think the pandemic is both helpful and harmful to just general working. It's nice to work from home. You get to get a little more work in. You don't have to commute. You get to be in an environment that you're comfortable in, but you kind of miss that collaboration. It's hard to really get to know your teammates when you're meeting them for the first time on a video call. It's really hard to be like, okay, I got my work support system here. But again, work from home is helpful to some people. I've seen a lot of people who are thriving because now they're in a comfortable environment. I think it really depends on the person. But I don't know what to make of this. It's a never before seen situation where we're in a pandemic. And I don't know if it's going to have a long-term effect on the industry. I assume it probably will. But I don't know to the extent of it.
Yeah, before I heard at least, and I've experienced in just a couple of places, like some places I've worked at, it's about like 50-50. Like some are so already lenient about work from home. And then a couple players were just kind of like really very adamant about like butt in seat, like at the office kind of work. And if you showed up 5 minutes late, you're like in trouble. And I've seen that kind of relax a little bit. And I think a lot of people need more accommodations just on account of, school's also closed, so the kids are home, or, mental health. It's like unprecedented. Like regular neurotypical people are being traumatized by a pandemic. So of course you need, and beyond pandemic, there's so many things going on. So there's just a lot more accommodations required, and I really hope that the accessibility of these accommodations sticks around. I think that would be awesome.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. This was awesome. We could not have had a better crew to kick off this series with. And I see in the chat, we have everyone saying from me on LinkedIn, and we'll be making some social posts on our Burlington Code Academy Instagram to pull in some more, share their LinkedIns and get these conversations continued if that's what people are interested in. And this was wonderful. I just want to thank you all again. I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your days. And yeah, reach out to us if you have any thoughts, questions, anything you want us to share with the fine audience, anything at all, we're here. And yeah, thank you. And everyone have an awesome rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.